Hello, this video is for Module 2 Part 2 and includes a discussion of the filter data action. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. So in Module 2.1, we considered the select data action. A select statement works on columns. A filter data action will work on rows or records in a data table. Let's consider example 2.1. We have looked at this data before and includes the disparities that exist across races for common chronic diseases in the United States. This data is provided to us for each county in the United States. The goal is to reduce the number of records so that only counties from Minnesota or Wisconsin are included. And a secondary goal is to include only the 7 fields that are shown here. So let's go and look at the data quickly. We will be looking at the chronic disease by race data. We will open that inside of Google Sheets. If you would rather work in Microsoft Excel, then you will simply download that data by right-clicking and selecting Download, and then you can obtain a copy of that data on your local computer. I'll be working in Google Sheets for this handout. Okay, so here is the data for all of the counties throughout the United States. And there's, again, several conditions that are included in this data. Kidney disease, heart disease, lung disease, etc. Diabetes is one. So the first thing I need to do is to highlight all of the data. And I can do that by selecting this box in the upper left-hand corner of the data table. And then I can say Data and create a filter. Now, if I want to obtain only the data for Minnesota and Wisconsin, and I want to do this in a novice way with copy and paste, what I need to do is simply select the drop-down for State. And then down here in the lower left corner here, I can specify what states I want to select. So here I can either select all of the states or I can clear them out. I'm going to select clear here, and then I'm going to specify only Minnesota and Wisconsin. So there's Minnesota, and then we'll go to the end there and select Wisconsin. Once that has been done, we're going to select OK. I do want you to pay attention to what happens to the rows here. So let's go ahead and select OK. And we will notice that several rows are missing. So we start here, row 1 is shown, but then the next row is 1313 and 1314. The rows that are missing are rows that are in other states, not in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So right now, the data table is hiding rows from us because we have a filter applied. And if rows do not meet the condition of the filter, then they are hidden from us. We don't want to use this table as it is for additional analyses. What I need to do is copy and paste that table onto a new sheet. And again, I'm only going to be selecting columns A through G here. So to do that, I simply would highlight the data that meets the condition there. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I'm highlighting the data for counties that are in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and then also just those fields that I would like. I select Edit, Copy. I can move on to a new sheet, and now I can paste special those paste values only. And that would be how you would obtain a data table where the records are from either Minnesota or Wisconsin. Notice on this new data table, I do not have rows that are hidden, so I can do additional analyses with this data table, and they will be correct because there's no rows that are being hidden from me. So that is how you complete a filter action using copy and paste. I also showed you how to do this in Excel, and there's a video for those that would prefer to do this via Excel. Let's next talk about filter by condition instead of filter by values. So what I did when I was selecting Minnesota and Wisconsin was a filter by values. But instead, with this example, I'm going to do a filter by condition. There are a variety of conditions that we can specify: if the cell is empty or not, if the cell contains certain information or starts with certain letters. We can do a filter on dates, and we also could do filters on numbers as well. All of these options are available to us when we filter by condition. So here I'm going to consider some information on home healthcare agencies, again across the entire United States. This data is provided in the data folder. I again want to obtain only the home healthcare agencies in Minnesota. However, there is an issue in that state is not actually one of the fields in the data file. So if we go across and look at all the different fields in this data file, state is not one of them. However, the state information is included in the mailing address field. So here you can see that these home healthcare agencies are from Alabama here. If we go down further in the list, we will see ones from Indiana, and then somewhere in here are going to be Louisiana. So let's just keep going and see if we can find some of the Minnesota ones. I went too far. There's New Mexico, Nevada. There we go. Here are the some of the home health care agencies that are in Minnesota. So now in this situation, what I need is my filter to look in this field to see if it contains MN for the state of Minnesota. Now, when we are doing our searching for this particular string, we are actually going to want to include the comma, MN, and the comma. And the reason we're going to want to do that is to avoid situations like the following. In this example here, okay, this is a fictitious example, but let's suppose that this particular home healthcare agency, which is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, is actually on Minnesota Street. We don't want this record to be selected because it is actually from Iowa. So when we're selecting or doing the filter by condition, we're going to say text contains, and then we are going to use comma Minnesota comma here. Okay, so let's go over and do that quickly. Here's the home healthcare data. I want to open this with Google Sheets again. I again am going to be working with this column here. Let's highlight all the data, turn the data filter on. To turn off a data filter, you can simply select Turn Off Filter. So you can easily turn those filters on or off on a data table. Now, I want to work with this column right here because that is the mailing address that contains the state. So I'm going to select the drop down here. I'm going to filter by condition. Now I'm going to select text contains. And again, the string that I want to search on is comma Minnesota comma. Go ahead and say OK. And what that hopefully does is returns only the records where Minnesota is the state. It looks like it worked correctly. Again, you're going to want to copy and paste this data onto a new data table because there are rows that are simply hidden in this data table. Okay, next then we're going to show you how to do a filter action at a more intermediate level. And we're going to do this in Google Sheets with the use of the query function, or if you want to work in Microsoft Excel, you would use the Power Query option or add-on in Excel. So again, I'm going to be working in Google Sheets here. To perform a filter action using the query statement, what we need to do is to use the where condition. So again, for a query statement, I simply type equal query. I have to give the query a data table name, so I have to do a named range again inside of Google Sheets. And then I need my select statement for the query. And that select statement needs to be contained in quotes, as you can see here. And the actual filter action is done with the where clause. Okay, so let's go back to our example with the chronic diseases. So if I want to obtain all the columns for counties in Minnesota, I would do something like the following. The star indicates here that I want to select all of the columns available in the data table. That is very common syntax. The state is actually contained in column C, so I only want to obtain the records where the state is equal to Minnesota. If I want to obtain particular columns, then I would just identify those with the select statement here. Here, what we would be doing in number 3 is selecting the counties from Minnesota or Wisconsin. This is the query that we're going to want to run. And we do that here with an OR statement. We can also do queries on columns like that involve numbers. So if they involve numbers, then we could do something like where the total is greater than 50. Okay, let's now go over and do a few of these example queries with our data. So again, I'm going back to the information on the chronic diseases. Let's go ahead and turn the filter off because I want to show you how to do this with a query statement instead. So in order to do a query statement, the first thing I need to do is to name my data table. So I'll select all of the data, and then under data, I want to select named ranges. And I will call this named range or this data table chronic disease. Select done. Now that data table has a name. We'll go on to a new sheet. Zoom in a little bit so that we can see this. And let's just start with equal query. I want to work with the chronic disease data table. And then I will say select. Let's just select all the columns where column C is equal to Minnesota. And I need to have this statement in double quotes, so I forgot my double quote there. When you're writing these queries, I would start with something very simple. Okay, so you could even start with something like this statement to make sure that we have the double quotes in place and that we have the correct data table name. Now this isn't the table that I want, and in fact this is simply going to return to me the entire data table. So that took a little bit of time because there's a lot of information that is being queried here. Now again, this is just the entire data table because I have not written my query statement as needed. But again, when you're writing your query statement, I would build this up kind of one element at a time. So now that I know that that works, now I can add the where condition, where C is equal to Minnesota. And we can try to run that now. Again, I'm using column C because the state information is in column C in my original data table. Now, my goal was to obtain information on Minnesota and Wisconsin. So let's modify the query statement. So I'll say, or column C is equal to Wisconsin. Oops. And to make this a little more readable, what I would encourage you to do is to use parentheses to kind of keep some elements of this select statement together. So when I put a parentheses around this part, I know that this part here is going to be part of the filter. So let's go ahead and see if that works. And this should be obtaining, again, just the records for Minnesota and Wisconsin. A secondary goal was to obtain just columns A through F. So let's go ahead and add that to my query. So A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G, I guess. That's going to give me the first 7 columns. So let's go ahead and do that. And if we zoom out a bunch, you can see indeed that I'm only getting those first 7 columns, and I'm only getting information on Minnesota and Wisconsin. So that's the desired outcome here for this particular filter. And that's what my final query statement would look like. We can also do the contains idea that we talked about up above when we filtered by condition. So let's go to that home healthcare data and show you how to do a contains here with Minnesota. So let's again turn off the data filter and show you how to do this with a contains statement. Real quickly, give this a name again. And this is home health care. Create a new sheet to put my query on. Equal query. It was home health care was the name of my data frame, data table. And then again, I want to do a select. Let's just try to get the query started by selecting everything here. Or maybe I just want, again, columns A, B, and C. Maybe I could do that. And again, because there's a lot of data, that might take a little bit of time. Okay, so now this is, again, I haven't done a where condition yet. So this is giving me all of the home healthcare agencies in the United States. And I wanted, again, my desire is to get those only in Minnesota. So I'm going to go back into my statement here again. And I want to select, let's go back to selecting all the information where column C again, which is actually the mailing address. Okay, so let's go back there and look at that a minute. Column C has the mailing address, and that's what I need to be searching for the state information. So where column C contains, and what we want to search for, as we discussed earlier, was that statement. Again, I want that information in a set of quotes. And we don't want to be mixing the double quotes with the single quotes. So this here is going to confuse the query statement because this would be the starting quote and that would be the ending quote there. All right, so I want to use a single quote when I'm talking about this particular string of characters here, the comma, Minnesota, comma. So this should obtain all the columns where column C contains the state of Minnesota. And we do a quick scan here. It looks like it worked. Let's maybe go down to the end here and check. And these are all just home health care agencies in Minnesota. Looks like there's about 170 of them or so. So that's how you would do a query statement with contains. And you can do things like starts with or ends with. You could do number with greater than, less than, or in between. The query function is very powerful and allows me to easily obtain a certain subset of records for a particular data table. I also have a Python document or a Colab document that shows you how this can be done in Python. Again, I don't expect that you are able to write the Python code, but this is just provided here for completeness of the notes. Okay, your task then for this module is to work with the immunization data from the state of Minnesota that we looked at in module 2.1. Again, the data for this is in our data folder, and it's the Minnesota Immunization Counties data. So if we open up that data quickly here in Google Sheets and look at it a minute, there are several columns here in this data set. Things like year, location, the different counties, population, and then a lot of different vaccines that are available to children. What I'd like you to do is to simply pose a question that you would like to answer from this data. And then what I'd like you to do is describe the combination of select and/or filter actions that are necessary to obtain a data table that could be used to answer your question. So the desired data table should contain a minimum amount of information that's needed to answer your question. So for example, if my question was which counties had the highest immunization rates for MMR in 2015 and 2019, what I would need to do is to select the counties, I would need to select the MMR information, and I would need to select the year information. So for me, I would need those three columns out of that original data table. I only want here to work with data from 2015 and 2019, so I would apply a filter to obtain only those records. So here might be a question and then the select filter combinations that I would need to answer that question. So I want you to do that, describe the combination of select and filter, and then I want you to propose a second question and do the same. And then for the second question, go ahead and tell me how many records and how many fields are in your desired data table. And then lastly, I would like you to do the actions necessary, so complete the actions and provide a screenshot of the final desired data table that you would use to answer your second question from up above. Simply paste that or copy, drag and drop that file here and make sure and select Upload Image to the course database. And finally, submit your notes. After the notes have been submitted, you will be able to check your answers with those that I have provided. In this particular situation, my questions and combinations obviously will be different than yours, but you can use my solutions as examples. Okay, that does it then for Module 2, Part 2, which covered the filter data verb. Thank you. Have a good day.